Hey guys, and welcome back to another PowerPoint on English literature. In this one, we will be discussing the long short story for your exam, which we already discussed in class. But with the exam coming up, I thought it would be wise to do a voiceover on this PowerPoint and upload it on the same Wikivase as the other one. So for this lesson, we have three goals. By the end, you should have an understanding of the plot of the Cut Glass Bowl. You will know who the characters in the Cut Glass Bowl are, and you can name the relation between the Cut Glass Bowl and the main character, which by now you know brings a lot of misery to the main character. So for today, we will start with an introduction. We will then move on to part 1, character, setting, and point of view. We will talk about the plot, and then the relation between the Cut Glass Bowl and the main character. This is F. Scott Fitzgerald. He wrote The Cut Glass Bowl. He was born in 1896 and he passed away in 1940. He was a novelist, a screenwriter, and a short story writer. He mainly wrote about the Jazz Age, which is a term he popularized, and he was married to Zelda. This is F. Scott Fitzgerald with his wife Zelda. F. Scott Fitzgerald also wrote The Great Gatsby, one of my favorite novels. And it was also made into a film which stars Leonardo DiCaprio and Tobey Maguire, who is the first Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man. This is an example of the cut glass bowl. It is a really expensive present, and back then they would give it as a wedding gift. Let's start with part 1, character, setting, and point of view. The characters are Evelyn Piper. Evelyn is the main character. She's really beautiful, and she's married to Harold Piper. Together, they have 2 kids, Julie Piper and Donald Piper. Then you have Carlton Canby, who was a suitor who wanted to marry Evelyn Piper, and Carlton also gave Evelyn the cut glass bowl. You have Mrs. Fairbolt, who at the beginning drops by at the Piper's house and has a conversation with Evelyn. Freddie is the current lover of Evelyn. Then you have Mr. and Mrs. Ahern, a couple who Harold gets in business with. And then you have Martha, who is the maid. Then you have the setting. As we've discussed in class, you have 3 types of setting. You have time, place, and environmental. In this case, the book was written around the 1920s. No, sorry, it was published in the 1920s, so it was written around the 1920s. It takes place in the United States, and the environmental setting of the story is World War I, because we find out that Donald dies during the war. And then we have point of view. We've discussed you have a first person, which is a narrator that uses I. You have a second person who speaks directly to you. And then you have a third person narrator, and that describes what is seen, but it is written as a spectator. The cut glass bowl, has a third person narrator. And then we have the plot. The plot of the Cut Glass Bowl is a story that follows a number of tragic events that are linked to the Cut Glass Bowl. The Cut Glass Bowl was given to Mrs. Piper as a wedding gift from a previous suitor, which is Carlton Canby, as we've already discussed. And he said that I'm going to give you a present that is as hard as you are, and as beautiful and as empty and as easy to see through. This Cut Glass Bowl brings a series of unfortunate events into the life of the Pipers. Like we said, the Cut Glass Bowl brings a series of tragic events in the life of Evelyn Piper. The first one is the discovery of Freddie in the house by Mr. Piper. Like I said, Evelyn and Freddie are having an affair, Evelyn actually already called it off by sending Freddie a letter, but Freddie didn't really understand the letter and just shows up at the house of the Pipers. Evelyn had promised Mr. Piper, Harold, that she will no longer see Freddie, and on the day that Freddie shows up, Harold comes home early from work. Freddie accidentally hits the ball on his way out, alerting Harold of his presence in the house. The result of this first tragic event is that there comes a gap in the marriage. In part 2, during the second tragic event, we find out that because of this, Evelyn's beauty starts to fade, several years has gone by, and she isn't as beautiful as she used to be. And also that Mr. Piper, Harold, starts to drink. This brings us to the second tragic event. The second tragic event is the injury to Julie's stump. So the second tragic event involves Julie Piper, the daughter of Evelyn and Harold. Julie cuts her thumb on the cut glass bowl. This develops into a blood poisoning, and the result of this is that Julie has her hand amputated. The last tragic event involves Donald Piper, the son. Martha receives a letter. Martha is the maid, but she gets distracted and leaves the letter in the cut glass bowl. The letter is from the Department of War, and in the letter it states that Donald had died while at war. The result of this is that Evelyn starts to run outside with the bowl, and the bowl starts to speak, and then eventually she fell to her death. The cut glass bowl and Evelyn. So we've just discussed the three tragic events. That is the relation between the cut glass bowl and Evelyn. The cut glass bowl was given to her by Carlton, an ex-lover, who wanted to marry Evelyn, but Evelyn wanted to marry up, so instead she married Harold. When Carlton gave Evelyn the bowl, he said, "I'm going to give you a present that is as hard as you are, and as beautiful and as empty and as easy to see through." What do you think this statement expresses about how Carlton feels about Evelyn now? Do you think Canby is praising Evelyn? Is her beauty presented as something that is good or bad? This is something to think about. You might find a question like this on your exam, so really think about it. And please, the three tragic events in the story are really, really, really important. As we've discussed in class, personification is giving an inanimate object a human attribute. So you're giving an object human attributes. Looking at the story, how does personification take place in the story? Well, we've just said that during the third unfortunate event, Evelyn starts to run outside with the class bowl who is talking to her, and normally a cut glass bowl doesn't talk. So the cut glass bowl is an inanimate object and talking is a human attribute. Therefore, that is an example of personification. The cut glass bowl says, "You see, I am fate and I am stronger than your puny." Puny means small, weak, not effective. Plans. Okay, so looking back, before we started with the lesson, I said that we have three goals. At the end, you should have an understanding of the plot. You will know who the characters are, and you can name the relation between the cut glass bowl and the main character. With this, I mean the three unfortunate events. And the three unfortunate events are really important for your exam. So please know these three unfortunate events by heart. Do you feel like we've achieved these goals? Let me know. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send an email to my email address from the Vavo Rijnmond College, or you can use my school email address. So it's either r.chong@vavorijnmondcollege.nl or 09270111@hr.nl.